Will you please pray with me? O Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, beloved Jesus Christ, Blessed Master, dearest Mother, saints and sages of all religions, I bow to all of you. Free my life from all obstacles. And give me physical, mental, and spiritual development. Make my mind thy temple. Make my heart thy altar. Make my love thy home. Be thou the only King. Reigning on the throne of my consciousness. Peace, bliss, amen. Good evening, everyone. Scripture reading from this evening comes from St. Matthew, beginning with chapter 4, verse 1. Then was Jesus led up of the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted of the devil. And when he had fasted 40 days and 40 nights, he was afterward a-hungered. And when the tempter came to him, he said, If thou be the Son of God, command that these stones be made bread. But he answered and said, It is written, Man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceedeth out of the mouth of God. Then the devil taketh him up into the holy city, and setteth him on a pinnacle of the temple. He saith unto him, If thou be the Son of God, cast thyself down, for it is written, He shall give his angels charge concerning thee, and in their hands they shall bear thee up, lest at any time thou shalt dash thy foot against a stone. Jesus said unto him, It is written again, Thou shalt not tempt the Lord thy God. Again, the devil taketh him up an exceeding high mountain, and showeth him all the kingdoms of the world, and the glory of them. And he saith unto him, All these things I will give thee, if thou wilt fall down and worship me. Then saith Jesus unto him, Get thee hence, Satan, for it is written, Thou shalt worship the Lord thy God, and him only shalt thou serve. Then the devil leaveth him, and behold, the angels came and ministered unto him. I'd like to talk this evening on the nature of the devil and evil. Christianity has 2,000 years of history, speaking of the devil, speaking of evil, and of course it dates far back, much more far back than this, through Judaism, through Hinduism, through Mahayana Buddhism. Every religion, every philosophical movement has some form of the devil or of some nature of it. Now the devil is Diablos, and that is a traducer, one who leads you over. And the addition to that is to disgrace, leads you over into contempt or into shame. The tempter is Perazo, and that is to test. Within every sadhaka's life, any time you set your attention upon God, and for that matter, any time you set yourself any goal, any high-minded goal, any distant goal that you would have to strive to attain, you will come up against oppositional forces. Now, a traducer is one who leads you over, takes you over to the other side. Anytime you set your mind to something, you have a focus for your attention, you have a goal, you have some end in mind. And then you begin to find the means and to implement the means in order to attain to that goal. When you set out to attain that goal, the oppositional force comes in many ways. It comes both internal and external. The internal types of forces that come want to take you over. They want to take you away from that goal. You feel lethargic. You run up against obstacles and you lose faith that you're able to attain what you set out to do. You come up against internal obstacles such as shame, thinking that perhaps it won't be good enough. And so before you even start or you get halfway through, that thought that it won't be good enough takes you over so much that you stop making any effort to go any further. You lose confidence in yourself. Perhaps you employ the help of other people, and those people aren't there for you in the way that you hoped they would be. And because you don't have confidence in yourself, you don't continue on. The number of obstacles that can come are endless in that way. But what can be predictable is that the obstacles will be there. I'm very skeptical when people speak of signs on the external level as proof that God is directing them in one direction or another, because of this tendency for there to be obstacles no matter what we set our mind to. When somebody says, well, I came up against this obstacle or that obstacle, that was God telling me not to proceed any further. Now sometimes external events can happen and they bring a clarified vision within us, and we see that we're no longer going to proceed along that way, that it's not right for us to continue. But to use that external obstacle as your lone signal that this is not the right way for you to go is not a steady compass. There is only one singular steady compass within you, and that is to go into the quietness of your own soul, to meditate deeply there upon the light, upon the inner God within, to ask the question, is this the right thing for me to do? To get beyond the noise of the mind, the emotions, and the body. Now the body can bring you great desire, and that acts as an obstacle in itself. And your own desire nature draws you into activities that are not necessarily for your highest good whatsoever. And oftentimes it can almost be a guarantee not to be for your highest good. And so you can't depend upon the body, and the body presents many obstacles along the way. Desire nature becomes extremely strong. In order to hear the voice of God, we must go beyond all desire nature within the body. Second come the emotions. The emotions will make us feel elated at one moment and dejected the next. That too is an unsteady compass. You'll find many times that great goals are started with a lot of enthusiasm. Everybody is cheering, everybody is wanting to go forward with it. Suddenly you find yourself out in the lead, and then you look around and you find you're the only one there. Everyone is cheering from a distance, but way in the background. And there you are. And then you wonder, perhaps I made the wrong choice here. And if you're running by emotion alone, very soon you run out of gas. You have no more life energy for it. You have no more enthusiasm for it. And as soon as the enthusiasm is gone, so is your cherished goal, because you give up on it. Thoughts, too, are an unsteady compass. We form certain ideas based on the amount of information that we have available to us at any one time. And through that, we use our logic, our reason, to establish our goals, to try to apprehend what is for our best good. And the mind, too, becomes taciturn. At one point, it collects a certain amount of information and it thinks that it's a good idea to proceed on. It looks like that we're able to achieve that goal. Then we get into some dark turn, we get into some obstacle. And our reasoning can take us just the opposite direction. Suddenly it looks like a bad idea that we've done that. Sometimes we try to establish what our goal is, and we look on one hand and it looks all right, there's some reasons for it, and there's some reasons against it. We look on the other hand and there's some reasons for it and some reasons against it. And back and forth we go. We can't ever establish any goal at all because we're always in that taciturn mind. We can never steady the mind. We can never bring it to a single focus. So it's absolutely necessary to achieve goals to bring the mind to a single focus. But unless we can do that, the mind is an extremely unsteady compass. When we become still within, we go beyond the body, we go beyond the emotions, and we go beyond our thoughts. We go into the inner stillness. Through that inner stillness comes a recognition, comes an awareness within us of a spirit, of a presence that is burning within. And through that presence, we feel an inclination, we feel a prompting to go in a certain direction. When we review that direction in our mind, we feel that spirit grows stronger. Now, if we've done our job properly up front, and we really tested that spirit before we make the final decision, then that spirit will burn steady, like a light that is within a hurricane lamp, that even though the winds blow, the light burns steady. And when the mind is illumined through the inner spirit, then that is buddhi, that is knowledge, gnosis. And through that knowledge we can guide our life. We can establish our goals, and we can continue on with them. Now, St. Anthony was one of the original church fathers, just within a couple of 100 years after Christ. He was a young man living in Egypt. He was a very wealthy young man. His father had died and left him many lands. He had a sister. And one day he was in a Christian service, and he heard the scripture saying of Jesus saying that to leave everything and to follow him. Well, he is an earnest man, and he took his religion very seriously. This verse really worked on him, and he couldn't put it out of his mind. So what did he do? He took all of his lands, he sold them. He took all of his property. He left a share large enough to make sure that his sister was well taken care of. And everything else he gave to the poor. And he headed off for a cave. Now, in Egypt, there were many caves that were up in the hills there. And he started out one cave where there were many people who were renunciants. And every day, different people would bring out some bread, perhaps some water. And through that, they had their sustenance. It was a very poor existence, but every day they prayed and they meditated. Well, even the number of people that were in that remote area were too much for him. He found it disturbing. And so he went into even more remote areas. Finally, he went into an area that had been used as a grave for many, many years. He went into that deep and dark area that was spooky, and he had a man who would bring him bread every couple of days. And when he was in there, he had this terrific fight, he had this terrific battle. Before him came the image of the devil, And he fought with that devil, and he fought literally. He fought physically. He would be physically beat up. And one time the devotee came, and there was the bread still and the water still that he brought from a few days before, untouched. He got the idea that perhaps St. Anthony was in trouble. And so he went in and he found him absolutely unconscious and stone dead, as a matter of fact. He brought him back to the temple, and everyone was mourning for his death. No breath, nothing. In the late night or early morning hours, the disciple was there meditating beside his master, and St. Anthony awoke out of this death sleep. And he says, "My job is not finished. Take me back to the cave." And back he went. And there was lights, there were sounds, there were screams. He was physically beaten, everything. And finally one day he emerged out of there. And when he emerged, he was a changed person. He had defeated his devils and the devil. He had defeated the evil that he found there. And he proceeded on to live out in the desert for many years until his 90th year. And he lived on very, very little. He had a little small farm there that he cultivated whatever it is that he needed. He had some water. All of it, Jesus came and blessed him with visions and with his presence. And wherever he went, he was a blessing to all. And when people discovered where he was, they would start to throng out to him, because it was reputed that there was miracles that would happen for people who met him. Finally, he came into the city one day. Alexander, it had been many years, many years since he had been into a city. He went to a church service, and there he found something raging in the church. There's a controversy. Within a couple hundred years after Jesus was born, there's a great controversy there. And this was one of the prime centers for Christianity at the time. Did Jesus really exist, or was it all a parable? And they would argue about it. And right in the middle of church, they would have service. And people would stand up and start shouting and start talking, and they'd start arguing. Well, of course, he was in the middle of this service, and people were in absolute awe. When he came in, all the people of the town turned out, Christian and non-Christian. He was so famous. The church was packed. The service was going forward, when suddenly there was an outbreak of this discussion. Did Jesus exist, or was he only a parable? Well, he was in deep meditation, St. Anthony was. But as this furor broke out, he was roused, and he was absolutely stunned to see this kind of behavior. Gradually he stood up, and everybody was so in awe of him that there grew to be a great hush throughout all the auditorium, throughout all the church. And everybody was so silent you could hear a pin drop. And then as he rose up to his great height, he said, "I have seen him." This changed the course of Christianity. This spread throughout all Christendom, because it was not only in Alexandria that this discussion was taking place. But then came this idea that Jesus was a man, that he was born, that it was not just a parable, but that there had been a living person who had gone by that name, who had lived and who had died, and had been resurrected once again. Now, St. Anthony's story is extremely interesting and important. He came at a time that we are entering into the Kali Yuga proper. He concretized the symbols. The devil for him was a living entity. He was beat up by this living entity. There were screams, there were lights, and all the rest of it. When Jesus appeared to him, he appeared as a man. And because of that, and because of those visions, and because of the way that it went out from what he said, then Christendom began to focus upon Jesus as a living, breathing person. Now, because we were entering into the Dark Ages, this took hold of all Christendom. And the universal Christ, that one that is the Spirit, the everlasting Spirit, the one that Jesus proclaimed when he said, "Before Abraham was, I am." Now, obviously, that was not his physical body and his personhood as Jesus. And I think a very interesting question for Christians would be, what was Jesus' name before he was born? It's a very interesting question. What was his name before he was born? He proclaimed himself that he lived. Now, he was born a Son of Man. He attained to the Son of God. And because of that, we honor him. We see him as one of the great avatars, having come onto this earth. But to concretize the entire path is to relegate it to the physical realm alone. Jesus' sayings are very difficult to follow at times because it is through his own example and his own words that he was seeking to raise people beyond the physical into the spiritual. He constantly made allusions to the symbols and the living nature of the symbols, and that they were not to be concretized. But of course, man's consciousness was not in an upward evolutionary state at the time. In general, mankind was going through the Dark Ages and a very difficult time of the Kali Yuga. And so not only did the devil become concretized as an individual, as a being, as someone who comes and tempts you and even scourges you and beats you up and creates sounds and sights and all the rest of it. The power of the mind is extremely potent. And when you take it on that level, it manifests as that level. It is the mind itself that manifests it. But the oppositional force is in full display, whether it becomes concretized through a physical act, through bruises on your body or bruises on your ego. Both are the same. Because when you set your mind upon God and for the attainment of God, every obstacle that comes in your way is that devil, is that oppositional force coming to you in order to dissuade you from attaining your goal. Now, in one way, this is a very natural law. It's true psychologically and it's true spiritually. And you would give it no greater credence than to say if you jumped out of a 10-story building from the 10th story and gravity performed its law and drew you to the ground. And splat, there you go, right on the ground. But you wouldn't say that gravity is punishing you. That's not the kind of language that we use for it. But you would say that is a natural law that took over, and it's predictable. In the very same way, when you set out to achieve a spiritual path, it's predictable that you will face resistance in this world. Now, sometimes that resistance becomes very strong, but it is all a reflection of your own consciousness. If you were not somehow involved with darkness on that level, it would not come to you to the degree that it does. But because of our past actions and because of our karma, those things come to us very powerfully. And they really hit us. It's no joke. And it's no small thing that we have to go through when we try to attain to a spiritual goal. The oppositional forces are very real and very powerful. But there's one great thing that is on your side. And that is that the light within you resides always. You do not have to create the light. You do not have to even become the light. You are already that light. It is a play upon the consciousness that your whole spiritual path takes place. And that's where the oppositional force is the greatest. It clouds your consciousness. It shapes your thinking. It comes as an energy force within you and can hang about you like a dark cloud. It can take over your emotional system and depress it. It can take over your body and make it feel terrible. All these things can the oppositional force do. But if you hang upon the light, if you hang upon that purity that is within you and residing within you, if you don't give in to that oppositional force whatsoever within your mind, now your thoughts may be shaped by it. You may have terrible thoughts when that oppositional force comes in. And you may be really wondering what God is up to. But it's all the play. And it's the play to make you draw stronger and more deeply upon the life within you, upon the light that is within you. You see, when we come up against oppositional forces, we feel weak. We feel overwhelmed at times. We feel helpless to change ourselves or to change others. And so we have to dig down deep into that light. We have to pray deeply. We have to meditate deeply. We have to draw so powerfully from it that it becomes more powerful than the darkness that is enshrouding us. And this is our moment of triumph. This is our moment that we have come for. When Jesus was in the Garden of Gethsemane and he was undergoing the temptation not to go through the crucifixion, of which was necessary in order for it to fulfill the very purpose for which he came. Those temptations were strong. It is said that he was sweating blood. Now, I've never sweat blood before, and all the anxiety that I've ever had, all the tension I've ever had. I don't know what you'd have to go through to sweat blood. But it said that that's what he was doing. And there is our example. There is our leader, so to speak. The one who is showing us the way. That no matter how powerfully those thoughts come, we resist them, we fight them, we work through them, we pray deeply. And through that deepened prayer, we access that great reservoir of life. That great reservoir of light that resides within you. It opens those rusty corridors that have long been closed to the light. And it is those very oppositional forces that force you to go so deeply within your soul that you break open those seals that have kept you so long separated. Now, it's a tremendous fight. But we must fight the fight. And you know, I think from a human standpoint, if we didn't go through a real fight, we wouldn't really believe we'd achieved anything. Because it's when we come up against that opposition, and it's when we persevere and we move ourselves through it, that we really feel like we've achieved something. Now, those oppositional forces can come outside of you as well. Through people in your life, they can take on a role. I don't know if you've ever been in a situation where you've interacted with somebody and you act in a very unusual way for yourself. You perhaps have a very strong reaction to them. And afterwards, you're shaking your head a little bit. I wonder why I acted that way. That's not like me. I don't normally do that. But there I was. And I acted in the most unusual way. And you have played a role for that individual. You have played a part in their drama, something that they needed in order to test them, in order to bring them into a greater consciousness, perhaps. And so through those experiences, you are being used. In other cases, others are being used in your life. Somebody takes a sudden dislike for you for no apparent reason whatsoever. What did you ever do to them? I had somebody one time in a work situation, and they just took a dislike for me, a hatred. They set out to destroy me professionally. And they spent a couple of years trying to do it. Now this oppositional force came into my life for a very real purpose. And within that purpose, others also were involved in it. And so it wasn't just me alone, but it involved people who are close to me as well. Now it was a test for many people. This was a powerful personality who did this. And so some people succumbed to them. And even though they knew it wasn't right, they quietly, silently assented to it. And then they would come to me later and tell me about it, which is very interesting. But it's very interesting when you're being told that somebody's conceived a hatred for you, and they just burn with that day and night, and that they want to destroy you. It's an unusual experience for me, but there it was. And so people come into your life and they play a role like that. And it serves a real purpose. Now, if we sometimes want to justify our own behavior, our bad behavior, and saying, oh, we must be playing a role for somebody else, well, that's very tricky ground indeed. That's someplace you don't want to go to. But sometimes you feel yourself pulled into it. And so if you play it with complete dispassion, without any attachment, sometimes you can play that role. And it's very important for the other individual. But you have to be in a total state of clarity within yourself, not to accrue karma for yourself. But when you face individuals in your life who are very difficult, who are pulling at you or pushing at you, who are trying to destroy you, trying to slander you, that's another meaning of the devil, is to slander. And so things will be made up about you, lies will be told about you. And there you are. What do you do? What do you do? And of course, you're free to protect yourself to the best that you can, but not to get ensnared further in the battle. You also have to remain free of attachment to it. Otherwise, you just get pulled into the drama of it, which only takes you off course, which is the nature of sin, is to get pulled off target, off course. And so sin, the devil, evil are all there as part of your spiritual journey. And they are all there to take you off course, to take your mind away where it should be. Now all that may sound a little intimidating and a little bit overwhelming at times, but it needn't be so. Because our jobs as sadhakas are very simple fundamentally. As Mother's great teaching is, it says, keep your mind upon God. Don't give power to these oppositional forces. Defend of yourself if you must, but don't give power to them. Don't give greater credence to them than what you have to. Rather, put your mind on God. See even behind the shadow, that oppositional force, that is the hand of God. There's a wonderful scriptural saying with Jesus in his interaction with Pilate. Pilate says, don't you know I have the power over your life in my own hands? Now, from a human standpoint, he was absolutely right. He had that legal power. But Jesus said, you would have no power over me were it not given to you from above. And in your acknowledgement, in his acknowledgement, is the acknowledgement that God is the supreme power. And when you acknowledge the same, you would have no power over me were it not given to you from above. You are acknowledging the supreme power of the Godhead, and you have just taken away that personalized power, the worldly power. You have put it in its correct context. And you can assume that since it's in your life and you have proclaimed yourself a sadhaka, that your goal is to get your realization, that this is there for your highest purpose. You know, we tell God, we want God realization, we want it in a hurry. We want to get it this lifetime, right? So all these forces begin to organize themselves into our lives to take us towards God. Well, the first time that happens, you know, we're screaming out, wait a minute. You know, I didn't want all of this. I wanted the easy path, you know, the rose petals thrown down on the ground, none of those thorns. I don't want to have to walk on thorns. But the moment that you declare that this is what you want, then all of these forces come together and form around you in order to bring the circumstances perfectly into your life so that you can achieve your own realization. Now, that also includes those oppositional forces. So everything that you come across in your own life is not by accident. And the less we personalize it, oh, that person is a terrible person. Why do they treat me that way? Why do they talk about me that way? That's awful. Don't they know what they're doing? And on and on and on we go. And this takes our mind away from where it should be. When we look at it from an impersonal standpoint, we say, it's not about that individual. This is God in human form, and God is orchestrating the show. God has brought this into my life right now for the exact purpose of which I stated I want most, and that is my realization. Now in the Bhagavad Gita it says, essentially the same as Jesus says, many are chosen, many are called, but few are chosen. And Krishna says, out of many thousands, one is inspired to rise up out of the doldrums of this earth into spiritual consciousness. But out of those many, only one here and there rise up to realize and know me perfectly. Now this is not because of any grading curve system where only one or two can get A's and everybody else is relegated to lower grades. It's not through any whimsical nature of God. It's because people's capacity for rising up above these oppositional forces vary. And so some will make a little effort for some time, and then suddenly, just like gravity, the world pulls them back. Others will rise up higher and make more progress and sustain it for longer periods of time. But again, the gravity pulls them back down to earth consciousness. Some are able to rise all the way up and escape the gravitational pull, and then they are free. Then they are free. Why have we come together in this time, in this group? It is to state that purpose clearly and purposefully, strongly in our life. This is the goal of my life. Within all other activities of my life, they all reside in the context, this is what I want. This is my goal. Nothing else has the supreme importance that this goal has. We come together in order to share the light, in order to share the strength, and draw from each other and to give to each other. Because it's not only what you come to receive, it's also what you come to give. To give of the light, of the intelligence, of the strength of your own spirit. Upon the spiritual path, it's oftentimes easy to focus upon our weaknesses, our smallness, the ways that we feel inadequate, the ways that we see the darkness within us. But that's just a tiny portion of ourselves. That's like the very tip of the iceberg that shows above. While residing beneath the surface is this vast body of spirit that you truly are. by proclaiming and focusing your mind on that vast spirit of consciousness that's within you. You bring those powers of spirit into your being, into your mind first. That's the first corridor. And through your mind, into your emotions, and through your body, and then out through the world. You are something magnificent. Not you in the ego sense, but in your spiritual self. You are tremendous beyond your own knowing. We just simply play along the surface like a tiny ant on the surface of the earth as a human being. But beneath that surface is a universal consciousness of which you have just barely begun to tap the surface. It is magnificent, it is powerful, it is beautiful beyond comprehension, beyond words, beyond description. And it is yours. It is you. So while oppositional forces may come, the light is stronger. One of my favorite analogies is the room that was kept in darkness for thousands of years. And one day the doors were thrown open, the light floods in, and the darkness that appeared to be omnipotent within that room, held sway for thousands of years, vanished like that. Just like that, as soon as the light came in. And the same is exactly true within your own consciousness. Let the light into your own consciousness and the darkness will disappear and be gone. Isn't that wonderful? Isn't that magnificent? It appears to be omnipotent right now. When you're in the darkness, it appears to be all-powerful. But I assure you, it is not. It is not. So deepen your quietness. Deepen your search for that inner light to open those corridors. And let that light, let that freshness of spirit, let that water of consciousness begin to come in and soothe you, to uplift you, to change you, and to transform you into your next evolutionary step, from the human to the God-man and God-woman. That is your goal. It is the pinnacle of human civilization and all human endeavors. And it is attainable, it is reachable, it is knowable. But you must make the effort, you must overcome these oppositional forces of the devil and of evil that are only a result of our own separation from God. Are there any questions or comments about what I've spoken about or your own sadhana at this point?
You speak of the devil as being concretized, mental energy that belongs to yourself.
Mm-hmm. Correct. There is also a world consciousness as well as our individual consciousness. And so, because of collective world consciousness, there's also darkness and that oppositional force that also exists beyond us in that sense, and from a human standpoint. And so both from individual consciousness as well as collective consciousness. I think that when St. Anthony went into some of these tombs, in Egypt, they had what they did at times is they killed thousands and thousands of slaves to go along with their master when they sent them off into the other world. There are these places where these spirits, entities, thought forms. You see, when there's a thought that's very powerfully put out, that penetrates into the very walls, it penetrates into the earth, and it leaves its presence in that way. Also, when people die, their spirits rise up, but because of the shock of their death or their state of consciousness at the time, they don't make the transition in a proper way. And so they wander around where they're at, and these can cause mischief where they're at and difficulties. So it explains, I remember a place over in St. Thomas Park that's by Lake Washington, and there was just an area there that I was walking along, and suddenly it was like there was a wall there of negative, dark energy, and it was near a place that was an outdoor kind of temple. And what came clear to me was that this had been a place, this was several years back, but there was a lot of Satan worship going on at the time. And it came to me that this had been used as a Satan worship place. And it was just like hitting a wall. I came up to it, I could walk around it, it had definition, it had shape. It was just as real as anything that's physical, but it was pure energy, it was invisible from the human eyes, but there it was. And so it was just this thought form that had been powerfully created through these minds that were intent on creating this ceremony. And so we can run up against that kind of thing. And so from that standpoint, it can be from the exterior of us, but it's part of the collective consciousness.
So I suppose you wouldn't be surprised to feel things like that around old battlefields or sites of massacres or natural disasters.
Absolutely, yeah. And they can linger for a long time.
I've heard that.
And the positive as well. I mean, part of our going on pilgrimages and going to places where saints have lived and where sacred sites also carry that powerful, positive vibration of light. And so that's there as well.
Yeah, I can still feel Master down at Mount Washington.
Absolutely. It's like walking into a sea of his vibrations. It just permeates the air there. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, all the good souls who come as well and add their power of God within that. And when it's an uplifting environment, then people tend to leave the positivity of their own consciousness there too. And in the same way, we can run across some pretty negative, pretty tough stuff. But by keeping our mind upon God, not giving it too much power, when we're walking through the woods at night and if we get scared, or if we're in a house alone and we get scared, the adrenaline starts running, the fear starts running, every little sound, every little movement, everything becomes another reason to get more afraid. And that just makes us panic, and through that panic we make poor decisions. So it doesn't serve us well to move into that, and we're taking our mind further and further away from where it should be, being on God. But when we have that absolute and clear faith, God is guiding me here. He's showing me how to get through this situation. He's telling me exactly what to do. And you keep your mind right there, focused right there, very centered, very strong, without any wavering at all. And he will guide you and show you exactly what to do.
I've seemingly had a lot of difficulty in past times when I've been wrestling with the opposing force, because sometimes it seems to come so hot and heavy, I haven't got any energy left over to keep my mind where it ought to be.
Mm-hmm. We can always direct the focus of our mind. And that doesn't mean that we automatically feel strong or full of light or any of those things. That doesn't happen like that. But we can keep our mind upon God. If we search, we can find some point of light. Now that may be God, Christ, Guru. God, Christ, Guru, or Om Shri Ram, Jai Ram, Jai Jai Ram. Keeping our mind upon the masters and upon the saints to affirm, this too shall pass. I will get through that. You see, all of that is keeping your mind on the light. Now, through much of that, you may not feel strong. You may not feel the light at all. but you're keeping your mind on the light. And as I've talked about before, if you're like the spelunker, the cave explorer, and you see a tiny pinpoint of light, it may be only a tiny pinpoint of light, but you keep that in your vision and you keep working towards it, and eventually you'll come to the mouth of the cave.
I think the thing I had a problem with is that oftentimes these little onslaughts are so insidious that I get sucked into it full bore and I forget.
Well, that's a great problem, of course.
Put all my energy into trying to defend myself.
And what we need to do is to keep our awareness up so that as we're moving into these things, we feel ourselves going into it. Because it's like the snowball, that starts at the top. Very easy to stop at the top of the hill. Let it get down to the bottom of the hill, and it just flattens us out and leaves us like a footprint in the snow. So to cultivate that awareness that your mind is always on God, and you will feel these things coming on. Now, it's very true. They can come on in a big hurry, and they can really hit us. We can't help it in that moment when it's hit us so powerfully. But as soon as we become aware, that's what this is. This is the oppositional force. Put our mind on God. Start implementing those things we've been taught. We will work our way out of that. Now the opposite is to start focusing on that oppositional force, keeping our mind on it, seeing it as more powerful, and we just sink deeper and deeper and deeper into it. It's never too late to turn back. It's never too late to get ourselves headed in the right direction, because we're constantly creating. Now, what that means is if we've walked down that path so far, we'll probably have to turn around and walk back to the Y on the road that we took that took us in that direction. But we have to do that in order to choose a different direction, to get going in a different way. So, in other words, we have to face that we've already created, that we've already given power to. But by keeping our mind on the source, by keeping our mind on God, we will get back to where we should be and get right on the right path again. So it's a working out. But what that is oftentimes a sign of when something hits us, and it's not always true, but it's oftentimes a sign that we've not had the intensity of sadhana that we should be expending. Our mind has wandered. We've allowed ourselves to go into corridors that we don't belong, and because of that, we get pulled down into a certain way. Now, sometimes we're keeping our mind exactly on God, we're doing exactly what we ought to be doing, and it's like we're hijacked. And we're taken into a certain course, but there again, the method is exactly the same. Keep your mind on God. Affirm the all-powerful nature of God. No matter how omnipotent this force seems, it is not. And the moment it's exposed to light, it's like the bacteria that immediately evaporates and disappears once it's exposed to light. As soon as it's exposed to light, it'll take its power away. So invoke that light, bring it into your consciousness to your greatest ability. And when you really do that with full intensity, the light will turn on and it will destroy whatever has been bothering you. So as I say, these powerful oppositional forces play a part in our sadhana. They're not just distractions. They're not just something to take us down the wrong path. They force us inside. They force us to draw upon that light in greater measure, and therefore they are the very instruments for our spiritual growth. And when we look back on it, we say, that actually turned out to be a very beneficial thing for me. Because of that, I really had to put my mind on God. I was just glued there. And that got me out of this, and because of that, the light within grows stronger. So then you can have gratitude even for that oppositional force. Usually from a little distance after the fact, not often during the fact. It's very nice when we can do it during the fact, but that's a tough time sometimes.
I have truly been blessed a few times.
One of the things that God told me about this recent events in New York City and the explosions and even the deaths and all of it, is that in the world consciousness, it's a demand for the world consciousness to access the light and bring the light forward. If we respond in that way, world consciousness will grow towards the light. Now we have a choice. We can act with judiciousness, with strength, with purpose, or we can give in to passions. And then it just turns into a blood feud. But if we act according to that higher light, then it will help to awaken the light within all, and will serve a higher good and a higher purpose. And that is my prayer and my desire for this world. Meher Baba said a very interesting thing one time. He spoke in such enigmatic ways, but he said he was in charge of World War II. During World War II, he said he's in charge of it. Now, it's funny to think that God would be in charge of a war. Not funny, haha, but funny, peculiar. But it's very interesting to see that these oppositional forces, what they do, how they clean things out, both in our lives personally, but also in the collective consciousness of the world. And how it helps towards the evolution of the world. Now, it's much better to learn through wisdom than it is through pain.
Oh yeah.
It's a lot nicer to walk through the door than to get drugged through the door. So the world is learning how to walk through the door, how to walk in wisdom. But oftentimes our own obstinacy, our own pig-headedness, we say we want to grow, and yet we resist it. And so we end up getting drugged through the door. And it's not easy and it's not fun, but it's still fulfilling our highest purpose.
Could you speak about the experience of the opening of the graves? This sounds like it's
Well, within the crucifixion experience, there is this, what is talked about as the opening up of the graves, and all the dead arise up. Inwardly, the graves reside within the subconscious mind, and they are the repository of all the experiences that we've had in this outward journey from God. In order to go through the complete crucifixion and resurrection, all of these graves need to be opened up. In other words, the subconscious mind needs to be completely purified. And as I have spoken about in the past, it's like having a basement in the house. And we've thrown garbage and whatever we haven't wanted down into the basement for years and years and years. One day there's just this terrible smell coming up through the vents, and we think, oh, I just can't even live with this anymore. What do we have to do? There's only one entry, one exit to this basement. We have to open the door, start hauling the stuff out into the trash barrel, and start burning it. It's the only way to get rid of it. And so with our own unconscious mind, up it comes. And during these experiences, whether we want it or not, up it comes, up it comes. And it takes form both within us and outside of us as people act out the scenarios as well. And so all of these things rise up out of the grave, but there's a purpose behind it. And it's to release them. Here they've been residing for millennia perhaps, lifetimes worth of experiences, coming up, coming up. As we surrender that to the light, put it into the light, let it be burned away in the light. Surrender it, let it go, not give it more power. Many people get sidetracked because these experiences come up and then they get involved with them, in the drama with them, and rather than just surrendering them and letting them go, they get caught up in it. Fears come up, terrible fears. Things that you never thought you'd be afraid of. And suddenly these fears just come up in a terrific kind of a way. There's a wonderful soul who was going through many experiences. She was in the third experience. And something happened that made her turn away from the light. And she turned her mind to psychic activity, towards past life activity, through astrology, and she lowered her mind and she went into those realms. Suddenly there was entities and energies that were attacking her from distant cities, and she just looked terrible. Looked terrible. She was in terrible shape for a long time. And she was preoccupied every time she talked about these kind of things, and wars, and these wars of energies, and all this psychic realm kind of stuff. Finally, it took her to a place where she is absolutely helpless in it, and thought that she was going to be destroyed. And finally, she turned her mind onto the Guru, and asked for help. That's how bad it got. It reminds me of Jared, Larry's son, who was lost one time, and when he finally got found, Larry asked him, "Were you scared?" And he says, "I was so scared, I prayed to God." Got that bad, huh? So it got so bad that she finally turned her mind to Mother, and it began to change her life. It took it away. It took it away. And it was a real change. It was something she really wanted to turn from. But you see, she had gotten to this level and she turned away from it. The fear had come on there. And this is, as Papa used to say, God realization is no joke. It's no joke. These are not easy things. But it's possible, and if we take that absolute determined point of mind, keeping it on God always, not letting any of the darkness, not letting any of the oppositional force have its power, then we will come through it, and we will attain to that realized state, to that light.
I'm still having difficulty with the idea of surrender. When you're in the middle of something that's very difficult, it's hard to know just what surrender is. You could be enduring something.
You're letting go. If we could analyze ourselves very carefully, and it's difficult when we're in the middle of an experience, especially a very powerful, emotional, spiritual experience. It's difficult to analyze ourselves. But I'll say shocked, when I realized that we have this stream of consciousness always going by. It's like a river going by. They're thoughts, feelings, impressions. We experience them all the time. If we try to be quiet for a little while, we'll see that this stream is constantly emerging from the subconscious mind. By attaching ourselves to any one of those thoughts, which we do all the time, by attaching ourselves to any one of those thoughts, we give it life. We invest it with life. It has a certain amount of life in that it's coming from the subconscious mind and out. But if we give it no attention, if we have no attachment to it, it just simply flows by. We can think of thousands of thoughts that have virtually no effect on us whatsoever. Oh yeah, that's right, I owe that bill at the end of the month. Okay, okay, I've noted that. It flows by. Oh, I'm in debt. I'm so in debt. I don't know how I'll ever get out of this. It's just, it's terrible. And you get it, and it just sinks you. You just sink into yourself. You have attached yourself to that thought. It's induced a feeling in you, and it just shuts your life force down, and it just makes you sink. We have done that to ourselves in that moment. We have attached ourselves to that thought. We've given it power. And we continue to give it power as long as we hold on to it. Now, that's not an advocacy for being irresponsible in the life. Oh, Dad, who cares? No. But when we attach ourselves to a thought, we give it power. The oppositional force that we experience inside of ourselves comes by us. It comes through us. It presents itself to us, either on the external or the internal. Do we give it power? Do we give it the attention of our mind? And the moment we do, we start feeding it. We say, why does this thought give me so much difficulty? And yet we ourselves are feeding it. And that was the shocking realization that I came to. I was feeding that thought. I was giving it life energy. I was giving it the power that I said that I didn't want it to have. By my own attachment, by my own focus of attention being on it. When I severed that connection, it no longer had any life energy. It had no power.
How do you sever something so strong that's within you?
Well, we've gone through different things. You can feel the cord of attachment coming from you. You can take out your sword of discrimination and sever that. That's visualization. You can denounce it. You can say, that is not mine. And with a very strong mind, just disassociate yourself from it. You can say, everything is God, and that too is God. And through that connection with God, you put your mind back onto God, and it takes the power away from it. So those are some ways that you can interact with it.
Is this called surrender?
That's surrender. It's
So
letting
it's
go.
active.
It is active. It's letting go. It's letting go of your attachment. It's letting go of your identification. Another way is to just, if it's a feeling, see it out in front of you. Oh, there's the feeling out. Oh, there's that dark, heavy energy sitting out in front of me. As soon as you see it out in front of you, you've created a little bit of distance between. You couldn't look at it if there wasn't a little bit of distance. So both psychologically and energetically, you've just created a little distance between yourself and that. So that's surrendering. It's letting it go. It's letting it go. And as soon as we sever that connection, it has no more power for us and over us. And as I say, the shocking revelation and humbling revelation came to me is that I was feeding it. I was giving it power. I was sustaining it. I didn't like it. I didn't want it. But there I was. Secretly, inwardly, I was holding on to it. It's a humbling place to come to. So, by taking our mind off of the devil, off of evil, off of sin, putting it onto God, we break its power. We give power to the light within us, to God within us. We open up that avenue. It purifies that part of ourselves. And as we do that with all these different dark places that are inside of us, we purify the mind, we purify the body, we purify the emotions. That's our sadhana. And with the purity of mind becoming absolute and complete, then there is nothing but light, nothing but God, nothing but realization. And that is our freedom, that is our happiness, that is everything.
My kind of thoughts that I've been using around that is, I wonder what God wants me to learn from this, of a way to separate.
Because you go back and you reconnect yourself to God in that.
And then I feel like I'm not giving it power because I'm saying God sent it to me.
Uh-huh.
I mean, not in a,
Mhm.
why is God doing this to me?
Right.
But, okay, what am I supposed to learn from this different?
In a constructive, useful way. Mhm. And we take so much power when we take fear away. Fear is one of our biggest enemies. And when we take fear away and we get curious about it, I wonder what God has in mind with this one. This is a curious one. And I wonder what's going on there. Because fear is just, it's a different form of attachment. Whether we love something or hate it, both are equal attachments. It's the wonderful story of Rama, who kills the 10-headed demon, Ravana. Ravana was completely focused on Rama, just absolutely hated him, wanted to destroy him so badly. Well, that was so true during the last weeks of his life and the last moments of his life. He was just absolutely intent on destroying Rama out on the battlefield. Rama cut his head off, and then another head, and then another head. All 10 of them went off. He was so focused on Rama that it's said that when he left the body, he went directly up into heaven, because he's absolutely focused on God, even though it was with hatred. But it was still absolute focused attention. So whether we absolutely love something or absolutely hate something, it's the same attachment. And of course, this is Jesus' great teaching, is to, focus on what you love, and you'll be drawn to it. You'll be drawn to it. And if we do that consistently, steadily, strongly, with great determination in our mind, and stay focused on what we love, focused on what we want in life, we will draw that to ourselves. And if that's God, we will draw God to ourselves. Babaji once is said to make the statement that the devotee determines his own path. If he has a very strong and critical mind, he attracts a very strong and critical path to him. You can make your own interpretation of St. Anthony. If you have a very accepting and loving attitude, then God comes to you very easily. So if we can just simply be in God's presence, receive it, accept it, then it is so. It is no more complicated than that. In this moment, if each one of us goes inside, we accept that completely and fully. Whether you feel it as God or not, you just say, this is God in human form, living his life, exactly as I am, not changed even one bit. Then you will have God's presence inside of you. And if you can do that moment to moment through the day, then you will have God with you always. Isn't that wonderful?
Hard time not thinking that God wants better for us, though.
Or he wants us to be more perfect in any thousands of ways, but that's the mind. That's the mind. And that's the point of separation. That's the point of separation. If God wanted thinner thighs, he would have made himself with thinner thighs.
He would have made more than 2% of the women to look like Barbie in the real world.
Yeah. So it's all his play. One of the things that God showed me is that it's here on the plane of duality that we need each other. We're incomplete as an individual in a human sense and in the human play. We need each other's intelligence, each other's skills, each other's feeling nature, whatever we bring that's special to us into the world. We need each other. And that's a wonderful thing. When God is absolute in his whole universal self, there's no sense of God giving to God. But here we can help each other, we can support each other, we can love each other, we can challenge each other. It's here. And so this is God's sport. It's his play. And it's his ananda. It's his bliss. And if we live life with the right attitude, it will be our ananda as well. Shall we pray? O Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, I feel the wonder and the beauty of thy glorious presence in every part of my being. My heart is bursting with my love for thee. I kneel in adoration at thy feet and surrender myself to thee. I feel the power of thy perfection surging in every cell of my body. My mind and my intelligence are radiant with thy healing light. My soul is filled with the ecstasy and bliss
My soul is filled with the ecstasy and bliss
of my communion with Thee.
of my communion with Thee.
I and my Father are one.
I and my Father are one.
Blessed Spirit, I am He.
Blessed Spirit, I am He.
Peace, bliss. Amen. Namaste. I bow to the light within you.